Hello, I'm Dawn Durham, and welcome to PaTTANpod. In the context of a multi-tiered system of support, in thinking about assessment of students and the high-stakes decision for placement into any program or intervention, we need to take into account several factors. Joining me today is Ana Sainz de la Peña, an educational consultant, ELD specialist. She's here to talk with us today about considerations we need to be thinking about for our English language learners. Thanks, Ana, for being here with us.
Hi, Dawn. I am happy to be here.
This is a super important topic, so we know we want to really dig right into the content. So if I'm going to start right away, when we think about within a multi-tiered system of support, so MTSS, the factors for identification and placement for an English language learner into a language instruction educational program, or an LIEP, help us understand the required process and what needs to happen to make this decision.
Yes, one of the very first things that we have to understand is that everything starts with the home language survey. The home language survey is provided to all parents who register children in not only Pennsylvania schools, but across the nation, because it is an Office for Civil Rights requirement that all families who are registering school-aged children have to fill out this home language survey. The home language survey actually has 3 or 4 questions related to finding out more about the first language that the child acquire, or if there is any other language spoken at home. Okay. So that's the very first step. Once parents answer that, then the second step is, if some of the answers say yes, that there is another language spoken at home, then there is a parent interview. Now, the parent interview is actually a new way to find out more about not only the first language of the child, but also the academic life of the child. Okay. You know, if he has been in school or preschool, all of those very good pieces of information that are going to help us provide that information so the placement will be the best placement for the child. So after the home language survey, which you can find you know, what questions and all of that in our PD website dedicated to English learners. After all of that information is acquired, then we go to the following step, which is the assessment.
Okay.
And the assessment actually is state-required assessment. And if the child is in kindergarten, then we have the WAPT, which is an English language proficiency assessment. So what do we find out with this? We really find out whether the child is proficient in listening, speaking, reading, and writing English. So there's one for kindergarten, but all of the other students, grades 1 through 12, take what we call the WIDA screener. And all of that information is provided to all schools in Pennsylvania. What they have to do is actually connect with the Department of Education to get more information. If you, for example, if you're in a district that this is the first time they have an EL family walking into their doors, then you really need to start, you know, communicating with PDE to find out how do you have access to these assessments. Okay. So after the assessment, then you find out whether the student is at each of the 5 levels of English language proficiency. If the student scores at a 5, which is bridging, then the student is actually exempt from being in the program because he has demonstrated proficiency in listening, speaking, reading, and writing. But if they are not at that level, then they are placed in the proper program to start the development of English as a second language.
One of the things I want to highlight here is that you had mentioned, you know, there's a set system in place.
Yes.
There's a set protocol from the minute we get that the home language survey to the parent interview to the assessment to then moving through what's required. There should be no guessing game. There's an established protocol set apart by the Department of Education. All materials and resources are available through the Department of Education.
Absolutely.
So that should make things quite easy for districts who may encounter an English learner for the first time or who have in the past had English learners but we're unsure of the process to follow. So I think that's a great system that we know it's a consistent system, it's a protocol that's been established, and it is expected of school districts to engage in that system, that process.
Absolutely. And then school districts also, or LEAs, because charter schools have to do the same thing, they also need to have some sort of a handbook with these procedures available for new principals, for new teachers, for new secretaries. Because remember, the secretary, the people that are really in that in the school front line to get registration, they are the first ones that start the whole system or the whole process.
Sure. So we want that first line of defense, if you will.
Yes.
When you're coming into a school to register, whether it be a kindergarten family or move in from another district or another area, that first line of defense should know this is the process. I know I need to have this family fill out this family survey or assist them in some way of filling that out. That handbook is a great piece that you mentioned. What I love about that is that there's no guessing. Is no, well, I heard we do this. There's no kind of through the grapevine information. It's all laid out there in black and white in the print, which I think makes it easy and consistent for everyone in the district to follow the protocol and make sure that we're compliant, which is what we want to be.
Absolutely. And consistency actually brings about really fidelity in how do we do this and better results.
Great. So still thinking about now we've gone through this process, we've done the assessments, we figured out the proficiency level, you know, what level this child's at. How do we share this information with families? Is there a specific manner or things that we have to share or way in which we should be sharing this information with families to make it accessible to them so they understand what's going on with their child and during the school day?
Well, parents, as you know, are our partners. They are very important stakeholders in, you know, throughout the life or the academic life of a child. One piece that is very important about parents who are also English learners is that we need to provide parents with not only the information, but in the language that they are able to understand. And that is a requirement from ESSA, it's a requirement from OCR. We have to be equipped and we have to know which channels we can use in order to provide interpretation, if we have an interpreter that can come and help these families navigate our system, or also translated documents. As we know, parents really are, they are new to our culture, they are new to the mainstream culture in America, they are not used to really know all the channels and all their rights that they have in order to support the education of their children. So it is the responsibility of the district, the school, the teachers in that school to be able to communicate with these parents, not only about if your child is learning or not, but also what program is this ESL or English Language Development Program, how is it connected to the LIEP, and how we are going to help your child become proficient so he could actually reach all of those standards that all children are supposed to reach. So communication with parents need to be based on the idea that you need to know whether you need an interpreter, whether you need a document to go home. And also, it goes beyond that. You know, how do we involve the community to help me reach out to these parents? Many school districts are very creative, and they look at community-based organizations that can provide them with spaces where they can have parents come during the evenings and find out more about the programs and how to help their children. There are also multilingual newspapers in the community, and many schools are using these newspapers to disseminate news about kindergarten registration, parent-teacher conferences, in the language that they already read in these newspapers. And they are free. They are like in the little bodegas, in the little places, supermarkets, where parents can just pick it up and read about it. So there are different ways that we can reach out these communities.
There's a couple of things you said that I want to kind of circle back to. You had talked about ensuring that any information we share with the families, whether it be oral or through documentation, that it is interpreted or translated for that family. That's not really an option. That's something we really have to be doing to ensure that the family understands where we assess their child, what we feel would be most appropriate for the child, but also to get the parents' input on the program we're thinking about for the child. Is that correct?
That's correct.
The other thing you had said that I want to highlight here is parents should know, of our English learners, parents should know, you know, where their child is in regards to their education, the program they're going to be involved in, the kind of expectations the school has for the child. I would think that's for all children, not just our English learners. So it really kind of brings it home that it's not an isolated group of students. This is all of our students, and all of our families should have access to that kind of information. And for a pocket of students, that means we may have to translate or interpret information differently than perhaps for other students, but all should have access to that, and our families all should have access to that.
Absolutely. And one piece that is also very important that we have found out is that especially students in the middle grades and high school, how do we get them engaged in being in school, in having a future? That is so important because many times parents do not know about extracurricular activities. And we know that the hook sometimes is in belonging to a choir, playing a sport, being in theater, doing all of the other things that all children have access, but because these families are new to our communities, they need to have that information too. We are very much focusing on that engagement because we know in research, engagement of these families and the children in school is what keeps them in school and they graduate.
Yes, we want to keep them, we want to hook them, as you had said, hook them into why they're here and the purpose and the joy of being here, keep them engaged in the process, but that doesn't stop at the child, is what I'm hearing you say. It belongs at the family level as well as the community level, keeping these kids engaged and then keeping them on track, as you had said, to graduate and realize and actualize that success at the end of the time period. So if I'm listening to this, I'm a teacher, a parent, an LEA, an administrator, and I'm listening to this and I'm saying, I need more about this. I need to understand more about placement and identification of English learners. Or I need more information about how do I engage my families of my English language learners. Where can we direct those folks to?
Okay. First of all, for identification and placement, since we have protocols, I will advise them to go to the PDE website where they can actually connect specifically with the advisors that we have at PDE who are always updating policies, updating ways in how can we improve these processes, identification and placement. So that could be the number one thing. I need to be connected. The other part is definitely also finding out through our PaTTAN offerings about how to engage families. We have really very strong pieces about family engagement. There's also the ESL portal, if they just, which is offering also not only ideas about family engagement, but also how can they actually work together and do some sort of like projects. So they are looking at other districts and see how they are engaging parents and they are disseminating that information. OELA, the Office of English Language Acquisition, is very much involved with ESA, and therefore they are focusing a lot of their efforts to give us information about family and community engagement. So those are the places that you can go. And for translations, we have Transac, which is offered to all districts, and that's a free service through the Department of Education. So Transac could be a way of finding documents, maybe even, like documents such as field trip permissions, that sometimes we say, how am I going to translate? I have 10 different languages. So where can I find that? So they can always use the resources of the Department of Education for translations. Some of the IUs also offer these services. And it is important, to make connections with the communities, because sometimes you may have a partnership with a community-based organization that caters to that culture and that language, and they could be very good partners in translating your documents and also offering qualified translators.
So it sounds like there's a lot of resources available. Perhaps we just weren't aware in the past or knew where to pull from. But it looks like we want to start at the Pennsylvania Department of Education website. We definitely want to be checking out the Pennsylvania Training and Technical Assistance Network, or PaTTAN, across the state, those 3 offices. You had said the IUs are extensive and may be able to help us in ways that we were unaware that they could be of assistance. We have the ESL portal and OELA, E-O-E-L-A, which could also be a source of assistance with understanding what we need to be doing, how we need to be doing, and then also possible translation and interpretation for those families to make sure we're communicating. So there's lots of things out there. We just make sure that everyone's funneling in that direction so we can get the information out and they can be using and pulling from those resources on a regular basis.
Absolutely.
So, Anna, let me ask you this. When we think about PaTTANpod specifically, our goal here is to inspire educational growth. Our goal is to start the conversation and to have folks thinking, well, what can I be doing? What can I be learning more about? Or how could I be strengthening and improving my own practice? What advice would you have for those folks listening in regards to inspiring their own educational growth, whether it be about English learners or not?
Okay. One of the things that we need to understand is that Pennsylvania has now more than 50,000 English learners. And we are growing in that area. So chances are, if you're a new teacher, a new principal, that you will get them in your district. Maybe you will not have the thousands that we see in Philadelphia, but you may have maybe 10, 20, and you never know when a family is going to walk into your school requesting registration to start a new life in the United States, or as well to just have children who are coming from Puerto Rico because of all the different disasters that we have had lately. So for me, I would say, from my part, I would say that every teacher who works in any district should be a little curious about English learners, because there is going to be a time when you are going to have these children in your classroom. And it is important that ESA now is focusing on English learners and the accountability about their academic development. So it is very good for you to understand how children learn. All children have very special talents, and they always bring something to the table, more so if they come from a different culture. So relating to the children, being culturally responsive to all the children that you have in front of you is definitely, your responsibility. So what I would advise is not only to start connecting with PDE, but with PaTTAN. PaTTAN in all three sites offers tremendous training to support children who actually have been underserved in the past. So start from there, look at your literacy connections to English learners. And there are wonderful websites like West Ed, like Colorín Colorado, that offer many good strategies, materials, books, the use of bilingual books. Now we have in Pennsylvania the possibility of having more programs that are dual language programs, in which children who are English speakers and children who are Spanish speakers are being taught in both languages, with the purpose of having these children graduate bilingual, biliteracy, and bicultural. What an asset for our state to have children developing these skills. So we have to look at everything from the perspective of something positive for our children. And that is the way, as a teacher, you need to be investigating. Teachers are definitely researchers. We never stop investigating.
That's true, yeah.
Finding out. It is so wonderful. And that's part of why I am an educator, because every year there's something new I have to learn. And that's not only a challenge, but also makes you a better professional, a better person.
So I like that. Be curious about your English learners. Be curious, reach out, ask questions, find out, because as you had said, at any point in time, you will have an English learner, if not 10, in your classroom at any given year. So we need to be prepared for that. So I like that. Be curious about your English language learners. Thank you so much, Anna, for being here with us today. We appreciate your insight, and moving forward, we hope to have more conversations with you about our English learners, because we know the topic is so needed and timely. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Dawn.
Thank you to all of you in the field. You truly inspire educational growth in your students every day. A special thank you to John Ragsdale for producing this podcast. We'll see you next time on PaTTANpod.